Welcome, investigator. Evil is on the rise. Crime is escalating. Our mission is to eliminate the crime by exposing evil, examine why it manifests, and highlight the brave souls that confront it every day. Join us as we work together to bring justice to every victim. Welcome to All Things Crime. Here's your host, Jared Bradley.
Hey, everyone. Welcome to another episode of All Things Crime. We are excited this morning. I have an amazing guest. I know you're going to love her. But while we're here, definitely hit the subscribe button and smash that little bell so that you never miss an episode. Can't even tell you how excited I am. So we have retired Sergeant Kimber Gist. She was with the Berkeley County Sheriffs in South Carolina. Love South Carolina, by the way. So the fact that you were born and raised there and get to work there makes me super jealous, especially the Charleston area. Man, what an incredible city that is. But yeah, Kimber, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's my honor. In fact, we met just a couple of months ago. Was it a couple of months? A month ago?
I can't remember that.
At the down in Fort Worth, Texas. Mm-hmm. You were being honored at the national. It's such a long. The National Law Enforcement Officer Hall of Fame induction ceremony.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's where we met. And you and your wonderful mom, she was there, and I thought that was so cool that she was able to actually introduce you to bring you up on stage. But if any of you have never heard of the National Law Enforcement Officer Hall of Fame, you definitely need to go check out their website. And we did an interview with one of the founders, Megan, just a few episodes ago, so you can go check that out too. So it was fun meeting you there. That was an amazing ceremony. Yeah. And your mom is such a sweet lady.
Thank you. She is.
She must have really had. I don't know. Was she nervous? Did she have a lot of fun? I mean, when she was introducing you there, how did she feel? Especially for the award that you got. Why don't we start there, and you can introduce yourself a little bit and talk about the Hall of Fame award that you got.
Yeah, so absolutely. So my name's Kimber Gist. I'm from South Carolina, born and raised, Spartanburg to be exact, but I ended up in Charleston in the Berkeley area because of college. So so the National Law Enforcement Officer Hall of Fame actually came out of surprise. I had no clue that I was being nominated until I actually did another interview with now a good friend, Tom Smith. Who told me about it and said, "Hey, you're getting inducted." And I was like, "What? Like, where did that come from?" That came out of nowhere. So, of course, I was honored, just completely honored to even be recognized even 8 years later from officer-involved shooting. So when they said, especially speaking with Megan, she's like, "Hey, somebody's got to introduce you. Who's got that going to be?" And I said, "Well, that's no-brainer, hands down. That's going to be my mother. She's taken care of me my entire life, been my biggest support system." So when I told her, she was nervous. She was like, "I have to stand up and talk to a room full of people." And I was like, "Yeah, but I mean, you don't really have to write anything down. You just got to speak from the heart," which is what she did, which is what she always does. So she had an amazing time. She loved the spirit. She loved the energy. She gets how, like law enforcement, we stick together, no matter good and bad. So she always enjoys it. She loves to see that camaraderie that we have, especially that night. That was an amazing night to be recognized. I enjoyed it. She enjoyed it. It was a lovely ceremony. Megan and them do a good job with that.
Yeah, it really was. That was the first time I've been there too. And so I definitely plan on being there every year and supporting them as much as I can. And I try to throw them out, a little shout out to them every chance I get, just because they're such an amazing organization.
Yes.
And in fact, I had Tom and Dan on. They will air right before your episodes. So they're with the Gold Shields podcast. So you need to go check that out too. Everyone that's listening here, goldshields.com, I think is their website. And so, but they were a couple of NYPD guys. So a little different than where you served.
Yes. Way different. I love talking to Tom that night. Tom and I talked probably like 2 or 3 times before we actually recorded the podcast, and it was just like he and I had just known each other for decades, for years, and of
Mhm.
course, the age gap. But even it was just us just talking about law enforcement in general. It was like we had worked a beat together. So love Tom, love him so much. He went through so much. He was also inducted with me, so that was an honor just to be inducted beside him. So the actual first night that Tom actually and I actually met in person was that night, and we've just been friends ever since. It's just kind of like that long lost friend that you never met. Um, Great guy, awesome, love him.
Oh, that's so cool. Yeah, I'll tell you, it's really been interesting. I've been on especially LinkedIn, and I've met so many law enforcement, folks and well, just even business people in general. And it's crazy. You develop this relationship that you're able to do online nowadays that you just
Yeah.
couldn't really do before, and you would never even imagine having a relationship with folks in New York and
Right.
California and all over the place. And now we have, not only can we do that, but on occasion, especially when we're able to travel, I'm actually I've linked up with a number of those folks, and in fact, there's a guy that his name's Ravi Rajani. He lives in London,
Oh wow.
and a couple of years, yeah, it's crazy. A couple of years ago, I was able to um, meet up with him in London. So my wife and I were over there celebrating our 30th wedding anniversary, and so yeah, yeah, it was weird. So it doesn't surprise me that you and Tom were able to link
Yes.
up, and then you just feel like you have this long-standing relationship, and
Yep.
even though you've never met face to face, you
Yep.
still can learn so much about other people and have
Mhm.
just really interesting conversations.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
well, I mean, look at us here.
Yep.
Here we are. You're in South Carolina, and I'm in Utah, and yeah, but uh, so well, I got to ask you right off the top, Kimber.
Hmm.
Are you a Clemson or a Gamecock?
Gamecock fans all the way, baby.
Okay, even growing up in
Don Staley, yes. Growing
even
up in
growing up in
Spartanburg.
Spartanburg. Wow.
Yep.
Okay.
Gamecock
Well,
fans.
sorry there, Clemson folks. You're just gonna have to deal with it. But no,
Everybody
but
asks me that. They're like, "Hey, you grew up in the upstate. You're a Clemson fan, right?" I'm like, "No, Gamecocks."
yeah, I'll tell you what, Spartanburg is a beautiful area too.
Yes.
So yeah, I've traveled all over South Carolina. It's just
Hmm. Love
absolutely
it.
love it. There's a reason so many people are retiring there and moving there just because,
Absolutely.
yeah, crazy, crazy beautiful. And Richland,
Hmm.
and especially because, I'm not just with the podcast. My company is actually MVAC system. Can't see it because of the stupid microphone, but the, with MVAC, I work with Charleston, with Richland County, with SLED,
Hmm.
um, York County. There's tons of MVACs there, and so I've been
Yeah.
able to travel that state, and wow, love it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, not during the summer months so much
Oh my
because it
God.
is just brutal, but
The humidity is like an oven. It just.
yeah, yeah. I have to tell you though, at least most of the time you have the mountains there, and then you have a little bit of beach,
Hmm.
but a little ocean breeze. It's not Missouri hot or Arkansas hot, I'll tell you that. But it's hot.
Yes, it's hot.
But the rest of the rest, other than that 3 months, boy, it just
Yes.
cannot
Beautiful
beat it.
time.
So, all right, well, enough of that. Being envious garbage. Let's get into your story, Kimber, because
Yeah.
I the more I read about it, the more I am just absolutely amazed.
Hmm.
And first of all, you are one tough chick. I'll tell
Thank
you
you.
that.
Thank you.
Kudos to you, and for your parents that raised you, and all your friends, everybody that um, helped to shape you who you were and who you are. And I think that character is probably one of the big reasons that you're actually here today. But get into what happened that night. Maybe a little bit of, kind of, because I actually read a little bit that you even had your sergeant there with you that night before the incident happened.
Yeah.
And you were like, it's just a typical night. Just, you can go.
Yeah,
and I'll
absolutely.
take care of this. So why don't you maybe start with a little bit prior to that, and then get
Yeah.
into the actual shooting.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. So the incident happened February 26, 2016. So I started working at our sheriff's office in December of 2013 as a corrections deputy. So quickly went to patrol right after that. I think I was in the jail maybe a total of 6 months and finally went to patrol. So our academy is 12 weeks long. So 2015 was still technically my rookie year. So I'm the typical rookie, right? Like you want to get your stats, you want to make the arrests, you want to be that go getter. So that's just who I was, quite frankly, really. But the area I worked in was not like the best area to work in. Unfortunately, a lot of crime, a lot of drugs, open air drug market. There's a lot of foot traffic, still some good people there, but unfortunately, there's still bad parts to every city that you come across. And that's unfortunately the city that I worked in at the time. So right before that incident, I had just gotten promoted to corporal. So in January of 2016, less than a year, they promoted me to corporal. So ironically, the next day, so February 27th, 2017, would have been my 1 year. So my shooting happened the day before my 1 year anniversary of being a patrol deputy. So that particular night, I wanted to go home early. So we worked night shift. So our typical shift was like 4:30 in the afternoon to 5:30 in the morning. This was a Thursday. We were supposed to be off that Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So my oldest nephew, his birthday was that weekend. So he's born in March. So I was going to go home back to Spartanburg, which is like maybe like a 2.5, 3 hour drive from Berkeley or whatever. So I asked my sergeant, I was like, hey, do you mind if I like cut out early so I'm not sleeping all day? All the night shift dogs get it. Like you don't want to be grumpy and drowsy the next day because you've been at work all night, right? So he was like, yeah, no problem. My shift was really good about that. If somebody needs to go home early because the next day they wanted to be up to do family stuff, it was fine. Normally getting off at 5:30, it let you leave at like 2, somewhere around there. But it was really, really slow that night. So around like midnight, my sergeant was like, "Yeah, if you want to just cut out and go home, like you can go do that." And I was like, "Yeah, I didn't really want to leave them because we were technically kind of short that night." He was like, "No, we got it. Just like go home." So me being me, I decided, well, I'll just do my final lap that I always did. I drove the same lap every time before I went home because it would just kind of put me on a direction to get back to my apartment. So it's kind of like that last like property checks, kind of sort of, but I'm on my way home. So there is a grocery store. It's a food line grocery store, and it closes. I think back then it closed at like maybe like 10 or 11. So having any cars in the parking lot after that was like unheard of, like unknown. Like there were never any cars. It was like a shopping plaza, so everything would be closed. So I remember I was
So,
driving.
Kimber, so what's the population of the town that you were serving in?
Oh, it's called Goose Creek, South Carolina. It's unincorporated, but it's blown up so much now that it's probably double digits now. So I can't really remember how big the population was, but a portion of it belonged to the city, and then the unincorporated portion belonged to the county. Pretty
Yeah, but
much,
it's not like this big city that you're.
no, it would be probably kind of, I don't know, probably kind of like Richland, maybe.
Okay,
Not the
so a
same
few
size as Charlotte, but like a little bit smaller than that. But it's not like a really,
few
really small town.
few 100,000 maybe.
Probably that. Yeah, that would be
Okay,
safe to say.
all right.
So I mean, it's
Sorry.
not small, but yeah,
Yeah.
but it's still pretty decent amount of people that live there. So when I drove by the store, I saw a car, and it ended up being a green. I think it was a Ford. Ended up being a green Ford that was parked in the back of the store. So I remember when I drove by, I was like, there's not supposed to be a car there. Like, why is there a car? And then specifically behind a shopping plaza. Like, nobody goes back there unless it's like delivery trucks. And then again at midnight, like, that's unheard of. So I drove up the road a little bit and I said, well, they just saw my fully marked truck. Like, they just saw me drive by. They'll pull off. So I turn around in the middle of the road up the street and I just sit there for like a couple of seconds, not long at all, just thinking, oh, they'll pull out now. They just saw the police come by. Come by. They didn't move. So I was like, hmm. So I drove back in front of the store and then I just slowly kind of crept up to where like it was catty corner. So you couldn't see where I was on the side, but their car was like here. So I'm coming here, their car's here. So it's kind of like blocked. So I'm thinking to myself, like, maybe they'll see me now and they'll just pull off. They still don't. So I'm just like, whatever, let me just check and see what this car has going on. So I called into our dispatcher and said, hey, I'll just get out with a suspicious car real quick. I'm behind the food line in Goose Creek. Um, so when I pulled in, I couldn't pull directly behind the car because the way the store kind of protruded out. So I was perpendicular with the car. So I get out and I'm giving them the car description where I am, and I'm in the middle of about to give them the tag. So when I walk up to the car, I realize, oh, it's a dealer tag. So of course, no plates on it. So I said, well, it's a dealer tag. Like, let me tell y'all who's in the car. Just give me a few minutes. Cool. Nothing out of the ordinary. This is like something typical that I would have done on every night shift when there's a suspicious car somewhere. So I remember I walk up to the driver's side of the car. There's a female driver in the front seat, and then there's a male passenger, but he's in the back seat on the passenger side, like closer to my truck. So they're sitting perpendicular from each other. Only two people in the car. So immediately that's like a weird seating arrangement. So my first question to her was, why are you sitting back here? And she turned like the ignition a little bit and was like, oh, the battery's dead. But I was like, she had like the floor lights. And I was like, those only come on if the engine is kind of like in the idle position. And she was like, no, 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 no. And I'm just like, that don't even sound right. But okay, whatever. I'm not gonna argue with you about a dead battery. So I said, well, why is he sitting in the back seat? And she was like, oh, well, I was trying to give him a ride home because he was working at the mall in North Charleston. Now, the mall in North Charleston from where we are is literally probably like a 15-minute ride, if that. That time of morning, he probably could have made it in 10. So I said, okay, where does he live? And she pointed across the street. So I'm like, well, if he lives across the street, why y'all parked back here? And then, mind you, our mall at the time closed at 10. It's 12. So what y'all been doing for 2 hours? And she was like, oh, well, he had to fold up clothes. I'm still in my brain going, I used to work in retail. Don't take you 2 hours to refold clothes. Whatever, not going to argue with you. So I said, how about y'all give me y'all's ID real quick? So she pulled out her ID, handed it to me. He said, oh, I don't have my ID on me. So I took her ID and I put it in my front of my uniform, like up under my pen, so you can know how you can secure it and hold it. We all do it. But he was in the back seat fidgeting around too much, like he wouldn't sit still. So I said, "How about you step out the car real quick, guy?" So he's still on that passenger side, so he's closest to my truck. So I walk back around to my truck, to the side of my truck where he's getting out of the car. So he gets out, and the only thing he has on is a wife beater like tank top, kind of like what I have on, and like some basketball shorts and some slides. Typical gear. Like I'm like, okay. So I'm like, well, I'm looking at him and I can tell like he has literally nothing on him. So I leave the back door open because I can still see her. So I'm like, you mind if I pat you down real quick? And he's like, no, ma'am. Immediately throws his hands up. I go to pat him down, and there's literally nothing on him. No ID, just basketball shorts and a t-shirt. And I said, you didn't go to work like this. Like, just be for real. Like, how long y'all been back here? And he was like, I just met her a couple of weeks ago, I think is what he said. I said, all right. I said, is this prostitution? What are y'all doing back here? And he kind of got quiet. And I was like, all right, bro. I said, if that's it, if everybody checks out, we're good. I'll let y'all go on about y'all days because I'm still trying to go home early too. So I asked him, I said, well, I'm going to go talk to her to make sure her story's the same. Do you mind sitting in my car? He goes, no. So I put him in the back seat of my car in the cage. Doors locked. He's out of the picture. Don't have to worry about him anymore. So the dispatcher asked, like, are you okay? And I was like, yeah, I'm fine. Like, I'll just check this girl's ID real quick and I'll be on my way. So I walked back to the car where she is. When I walked back up on the passenger side, I never went back around to the driver's side because the door's open. There's no point in doing that. So I remember smelling like something like really fruity. And I was like, what did you just spray? And she was like, nothing. I said, well, you sprayed something because your car didn't smell like perfume before I walked up here the first time, but now it smells like perfume. And she was like, oh, well, I sprayed this. I just like how it smells. And I'm like, who just randomly does that? So I'm thinking drugs at that point because she's like, she probably thinks I smell something. So I was like, can you just step out the car for me real quick? And she does. So as soon as she gets out the car, I realize that the front of her pants are unzipped. And she keeps tugging down on the front of her shirt, trying to pull her shirt down. So I'm like, hey, like, don't go reaching around. Like, why are your pants unbuttoned? And she's like, oh, I just like to sit like this. So I'm like, well, put your hands on the front of my car real quick. So now we're standing in front of, in front of her car. So we're standing in front of her car. And I said, hey, put your just hands on the hood for me real quick. I'm just going to make sure you don't have any weapons. She's still tugging on her shirt. So I'm like, if you're back here and y'all are doing something like sexual, just say that. Like this, it's not that big of a deal. Like I'll cut you a ticket and let y'all go home. So she's like, no, 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 it's not like that. I was giving him a ride home, still tugging on her shirt. So now I grab her hand. I said, hey, I've already asked you twice to stop reaching around. So that's when I asked our dispatcher, hey, can y'all send another unit? So the zone that I was working in, I had a partner that worked beside me. He was probably maybe like 2 miles up the road on a traffic stop. And he was training a guy that, previous experienced guy, but he was coming from another department. And they were like, yeah, he was like, I'm just up the street. I'll be on the way in just a second. I was like, all right, cool, whatever. Like, I just want somebody else here with me because now she's not following directions type thing. So then she starts reaching around again. I slam her hand on the hood and I was like, look, stop moving, stop reaching around. Like, I'm about to pat you down, make sure you don't have any weapons. Well, then she locks her arm. So that's when I get on the radio and I was like, all right, we're about to fight. So 10-10 for us is a fight in progress. So I just say that really quick on the radio. So as I try to so she's in front of me. I got her hands like trying to put her hands behind her back. So I'm directly behind her. So I had my lapel mic. So when I turn my head, so like key up to tell them that I was fighting a girl, she was already turning. So I thought when she was turning with like her left that she was just gonna try to like right hand or left hand me, give me like a little hook or whatever. So to my surprise, it was not a her trying to fight me. That was when the first shot went off. So I remember like turning my head and then I heard something like really, really loud and then everything just went silent. So I was like, what in the world was that? And I remember seeing something like really, really bright flash, kind of like to the point where it made me blind almost. And the thing I could only see was like little particles in the air. For anybody that's ever been involved in a shooting, the first thing that goes is your hearing. And then the second thing is like time slows down. So I just remember like seeing little particles in the air. Like I can never see particles at any other part of my life. Like, why am I seeing that now? So I'm standing there kind of like in a daze almost like, what did I just see and what just happened and what was that loud bang? So I was like, okay, like you got to figure it out. So like take a deep breath in. So that's what I did. I took a really deep breath in and that's when I smelled gunpowder. Obviously being in law enforcement, you're on the range, you know what gunpowder smells like. And I was like, oh, she's shooting at me. This is kind of like me in like milliseconds thinking to myself. So I was like, oh crap, like this girl. And that's when I could feel like the burning on this ear. You can't really see it, but that's where the burning started. So I was like, okay, she's shooting at me. Like, get your bearings together. So I'm assuming with her like pushing and that first shot like hitting me on the side of my ear, was actually like the momentum with that pushed me to the ground. So I'm falling at the same time all of this is going on. So I hit the ground on my right side. So immediately I'm like, well, that's my gun side. So I got one or two choices to make, either roll left or roll right. My thought was if I roll left, I've already been shot on the left side and then my right arm will stay free. Well, that worked. However, as soon as I hit the ground, she was like standing over me, still shooting. So I just rolled, kicked my leg out because I was like, well, at this point, a leg injury is better than a head or my hand. So I stuck my foot out. And that's when I remember seeing like the bone in my foot like shoot up when the bullet came through. So that was the part that really, really made me mad because out of all the other shots that I had gotten just laying on the ground, I really couldn't feel them. They kind of feel like little pinches. Like if somebody would just walk up to you and pinch, they don't really hurt immediately. It's just like a pinch. But the one that came through my foot, like I could feel like the bone like breaking in my foot. And that just fired me up so bad. So that's when I was able to like pull out my gun on the right side. So I'm laying on my back, kind of like sitting up just a little bit. I didn't want to sit all the way up because I didn't want to take a headshot, obviously, because she's still at this point angled down because I'm laying down. So I start shooting back at her. So then that's when she realizes what's going on. So she's kind of like trying to stand behind her car to get cover. I can't get up at this point because if I get up and do anything, like she's got the upper hand. So I'm just like, I just got to lay here and shoot at this chick. So she finally fell behind the car. And that's when I was like, okay, this is my chance to get up. So I jumped up real quick. And then to my right is a big trash can. So like a little garbage, the cans that you would see outside of a normal store or whatever. So I was like, all right, that's some cover I can get to. Completely forgot about my car. So I just shoot across the parking lot real quick and jump behind the trash can. So as I'm shooting across the parking lot, I'm telling them, shots fired on the radio. I get behind the trash can, do a mag change because I didn't know how many times I shot, didn't want to risk it. So I'm like behind the trash can. So I'm like either go right or left. So when I pop out left to try to see where she was, is when I see that the car is moving that she's in. And me, I'm going, well, she told me the battery's dead. Like, how was the car back in play? Like, to me and my thought, I was like, no, you told me the battery was dead. Like, get out of your car and, like, fight me. Like, you already started this fight. Like, why are you running away from me? So she backed the car up and she drove around the opposite side of the store. So when she drove around the opposite side of the store, I was still closest to the side that I came in on. So I just ran around and I met her in the front of the parking lot. So she's driving across the parking lot. Here I am running. I lock eyes with her. It was like when I saw her, it was like she saw a ghost. Like she just knew I was dead and she was just standing there. So at first, I was just gonna like start shooting at the car across the parking lot, but I didn't feel comfortable doing that because again, that's a high traffic foot area. They do open air drug markets, like they just walk around. I didn't want to risk shooting somebody, so she drove off and then she made a right. Now, when she made that right to go where she was going, I knew for a fact that she was going back the direction that he said that they came from, which was from the mall. That would be the easiest route for her to get back to. So at this point, like the timing speeds back up. Like I got all my senses back. I can hear, I can smell, I can taste. And then that's when I like fell in the front of the parking lot. And I didn't know why because I truthfully didn't know how many times I had been shot. But I remember falling in the front of the parking lot. I remember I threw up in the front of the parking lot, and that's when I see blood everywhere. And I was getting like to the point where I couldn't even hold myself up. I was just disoriented, obviously. So I was trying to make a decision on. So there's a gas station. There's a Circle K gas station at the front of this plaza, and then there's my truck. So I'm in the middle. I'm like, can you make it to the truck or can you make it to the gas station? You got to pick one. So I was like, well, shit. If I go to my truck and I just die behind my truck, nobody's gonna find me. But if I just go and collapse in front of a gas station parking lot, eventually somebody's gonna walk outside, whether it be the clerk. So I start going towards the gas station. There's a green car that starts driving down the road that I was driving on before I turned into the parking lot, and the car stops. So I remember I walked up to the girl's passenger side window and I told her, I said, I need for you to call 911, say this number, and say, all you got to do is say my call sign, which I told her at the time was 144. And I said, save this number, call them, say she's been shot, and that's all you got to say. Just give the location. And I remember I still had my gun in my hand because I'm like, I don't know if he's coming back. I don't know these threats. And then I realized when I looked up that I had blood all over the side of her car. And she's like staring at me like a ghost. And she's like, okay. And her hands are shaking. But I didn't realize what I looked like to her. It was like blood all over my uniform, all over my face. I got a gun in my hand. She's like just as freaked out as everybody else. So kind of like a couple of it didn't seem that long, maybe seconds after that is when my sergeant pulled up that already told me to go home. So he gets there first. My partner that was already coming, all of them start flying in. I like lay on the ground and I hand him my gun and I said, I don't know what's gonna happen from here on out. I said, but y'all got it. I said, I'm hurt. I don't know where I'm hit. I said, my stomach hurts. I remember I kept saying, my stomach hurts, my stomach hurts. So they're like stripping me down, trying to figure out all these holes. And they're like, well, you're shot in your leg, you're shot in your face, you're shot in your foot. We can't find the one for your stomach. Well, the one for my stomach went under my vest. So I had the shot in the side. So that's where they couldn't find that one because they didn't take all of my clothes off. They were just doing the rake and they could just put the tourniquet on from what they saw. So my sergeant's there and he's like, who did it? Who did it? So I was like, oh, wait, I still had her ID in the front of my shirt. So I snatched it and I handed it to him. So all the guys were like staring at me. They was like, where'd you get the ID from? I said, she handed it to me. Like, that's where it came from. It didn't just fall out of the air. So they was like, okay. And they was like, well, where did she go? I said, she pulled out. She made it right. I said, they said they came from, it's a little area in North Charleston. So I told them that area. I said, if she's going anywhere, she's going back there. So they were like, okay. They was like, where's your truck? I said, behind the store. And then my partner ran back there and he was like, there's another guy in the car. And I said, oh, I forgot about him. I said, yeah, he's cool. I said, yeah, he's cool. I said, he's been back there for a minute, so y'all might want to like let him out. So they ended up talking to him. They rushed me to the hospital. And when I get to the hospital, like I'm just completely just nude. And they're like rolling me and flipping me over and they're counting out loud. And they're like, I found this one, I found that one. And I'm like looking at them like, could y'all not just tell me out loud how many times I've been shot right now? Because I don't know what's going to happen. I've never been shot before. This is my first time really being in this predicament in life, really like a life threatening situation. So I remember like my sheriff got there, my chief got there. They actually called my mom before I went into surgery because obviously she was like 3 hours away. So they called her. Their initial thought was to get SLED and them to put a helicopter up, but the weather was too bad. So they actually called a deputy from Spartanburg. He went and woke my mom up. That's how she answered the phone. He put her in the car, drove her to Columbia, and then a trooper met her in Columbia and brought her to Charleston. So by the time I got out of surgery, I think she said I was in surgery maybe like 8 or 9 hours. Um, she was there. So they ended up finding him before I even went into surgery. They were like, "Oh, we found him already." So I was like, "Okay." And I remember telling my sergeant, I was like, it's a girl, it's a girl, it's a girl. Like, this is what she looked like. And he was like, well, the ID says a male. So I was like, I'm confused. Like, what are you talking about? So they was like, was it a female or was it a male? And I said, it was definitely a female that shot me. He goes, okay. So they go to the house. Come to find out, it was actually a transgender. So she was actually born male but living as female. So that's why they were like all confused. So they get to the house. They surround the house. Whatever. They send all of the roommates ended up coming out of the house except for her. So they start negotiations, and he's like, "Well, she shot me. I need EMS." North Charleston Sled and them are all there, and they're like, "Fuck you! You're not getting any of that. Like, you just shot one of our deputies. She's in surgery. You can just bleed to death, pretty much." So right when they got sick of doing negotiations, they North Charleston SWAT team actually knocked the door, and as soon as they knocked the door, she ended up killing herself. So when they walked in, they saw where she was like trying to do like a makeshift tourniquet, where she was like trying to like I don't know what she was doing. I really don't care at this point. But she ended up dying that morning, and then the next morning, so the morning of the 27th, is when everybody was like, "Oh, it's your 1 year anniversary! Like, congratulations!" I was like, "Yeah, I guess so." But yeah, that's pretty much what happened. I ended up. The news said I was shot 9 times, and they got 9 because that's how many rounds that she actually shot at me. So I was actually hit in my foot, my knee, ear, lip, and then radio was hit. That's why I lost communication. So the last communication they had with me was when I said that, hey, I'm in a fight. And then they lost all contact because I was trying to figure out like where everybody was. Come to find out, I wasn't transmitting when I said shots fired because my radio was hit. And then the one that went under my vest and got lodged in my stomach. So they ended up, that was the surgery that took the longest, right? Because they didn't want me to come out with a colostomy bag and all that good stuff. So, but yeah.
Well, that sounds like a fun night. Jeez. Kimber, what the
Oh, yeah.
heck? That's crazy. Well, and I didn't even catch that it was actually, a biological male
Yes, biological male.
that oh,
Hmm.
okay, well, I mean that actually explains some things because, the aggression and um, you know,
The strength.
yeah, the
Yeah,
strength,
the strength. Yep.
um off kilter a little bit.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's anyway that um
Yeah.
wow.
And
Wow.
then
Well,
and then
honestly, that it
and then
just
the funny part in that, well, I guess not really funny, but when they were talking to the young man that I had in the back seat, he had no clue that she was actually male. So I won't get too graphic, but there was like some messages, and they were actually attempting to have intercourse, but it wasn't going as planned because he didn't realize that it was a male. So
hmm,
he completely spazzed out. After that, haven't seen him since. Haven't Don't know where he is.
I'm sure that would have, once he fully realized that would have been a real moment. So,
Yeah.
well, thank God you were protected enough.
Yeah.
I mean, geez, wow. So I want to go back to the way you were first describing it.
Mm.
And, I served at 14 years in the Army and, went through lots of trainings, but I never actually went to a war zone. So I never actually got shot at.
Mm.
So it's hard, even having a military background, it's kind of hard for me to relate with what you're talking about here. Now, I have had lots of friends that have, been in firefights, and they describe that the way you did, the way
Mm.
time kind of slows down. Things slow down, and so it's almost like things are moving in slow motion,
Yep.
um, which is amazing. And I think it's actually kind of a defense mechanism for when adrenaline kicks in like that. But the first shot that went off is what that hit your ear, right?
Yeah, so it hit my ear. We're trying to figure out, we never really could figure out if this was the same one that went through my lip that took the bottom portion of my lip off. I've had since plastic surgery, obviously.
Mm,
So I know for a fact when that first one hit, it did hit this ear. Now, I don't know if the second one was the lip, but yeah, that first one was the one that knocked my senses completely haywire.
right.
Yeah.
Well, and you said you saw a flash, and but you were thinking, what just happened?
Yeah.
So I mean, all that stuff that you described. So from the first shot to the ninth shot, how much time do you think that actually was, or do you have any
Oh,
idea?
they actually told me. I can't remember now because it's been so long, but they literally said from the time that I said 10:10 to the part where they actually showed up was less than 5 minutes. I think the actual shooting itself was maybe like a minute and a half, maybe
Wow.
a minute and a half. It was not long at all. It just felt like it was 15, 20 minutes because when I asked them, I said, y'all, how long was I back there? And they were like, no, you radioed in that you were getting out with the car like at like 12:08. And then they said like at like 12:10, maybe 12:11 is when I said 10:10. And then I think they said 12, maybe 12:14, 15 is when the call somewhere came in there. So it wasn't long. It was really quick.
Well,
Yeah.
well, a lot of stuff can happen in that much time.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, when you were firing back, did you actually hit her, him? Did you actually, when you were returning fire, did you hit him?
Yeah, that was the leg shot that she was trying to do the tourniquet on. Apparently that makes sense on how she fell behind the car. Um so when they said that they obviously did the autopsy, she had the one where they were like, well, she didn't come out. She was probably gonna die anyway because she was losing blood. I mean, there was a blood trail where you saw that she was trying to wrap her leg up. She pretty much got into bed and was just like, okay, whatever. So yeah, so she had the one that she did to herself, and then she had the leg wound.
Okay.
Mhm.
Wow. Well, I'm sure recovery was a lot of fun.
Oh yeah.
All
Ooh.
those. How many surgeries did you say you've been through?
So I had the initial one when I went in. They had to wait a few days for my leg because they didn't want to do too much with the one thing they said was swelling. I didn't realize that, but especially like with your feet, especially with bone, if it's too swollen, there's pretty much nothing they can do because they can't even get to it. So I had that one. I had I think four plastic surgeries, and that's from the ear, the lip. They had to move some stuff from my hip to the front because I have that big scar now from where they did the actual cut. It still never healed correctly. I just keloid, so it is what it is now. It's just a nice scar. So altogether, I've had at least 7 surgeries, at least
Wow.
somewhere in there. Yeah, and the main
Well,
one was just the stomach. So
yeah, you're. Well, I mean, when I met you, a month ago, um, would have never been able to tell that you had been shot that many times. So
Yeah.
when you were up there talking and you're describing it, I had no idea on your story at that point, and I was just like, what? How in the world did this woman get shot that many times, and yet you were walking fine, you were looking great. So
Yeah.
wow. Well, modern medicine, that's another awesome
Absolutely.
thing about things that they can do that, you know, I mean, the one good thing about war, I guess, is they can heal gunshots and stuff pretty fast now. So
Yeah,
that's
they can heal gunshots pretty quickly. They can heal bones pretty quickly. I was out for a year, but the mental aspect, that's what takes the longest. I don't think people realize is they look at you and
yeah.
say, "Oh, well, you're fine," but then they don't realize you still got to go to sleep at night. You still got to think about that.
Oh
So,
yeah. Well, that's a thing about I've had enough guests on the show that are like specialists in
mhm.
forensics and psychology and things like that. That they I mean, just think. I'm sure that you will never actually get that memory of that flash going off, and you think just a
Mm-mm.
few centimeters to the left,
We're not having this conversation.
yeah, you wouldn't even be here anymore. So
Right.
uh, not only yeah, you are destined to do some fantastic things in life because clearly the Lord was protecting you that night. So
Absolutely, still grateful for them. Still,
yeah, well, so you're doing now. That's been 8 years since that happened.
yes,
Wow. Okay. So it
yes,
took you a full year to recover from the physical wounds.
yes.
And then what have you been doing to take care of yourself mentally and everything since then?
Yeah, so initially, I thank my sheriff for obviously recognizing that you just got to go talk to somebody after that. Like nobody is supposed to be shot, or nobody is supposed to have their life to the point where they're about to die. Pretty much, somebody tried to murder me. Is pretty much what I had to wrap my mind around, and I had to accept that. Like somebody, and it wasn't one of those situations where I tried to talk myself out of like, oh, she just wanted to do like the one shot to scare me and run off. Like, nah, that bitch stood over me. Like she wanted to just end everything. So nobody should ever have to go through that in general. So I recognize and accept the fact that they forced me for a reason because I was not going. But luckily they did. So I went to therapy probably 3 times a week right after that happened. I didn't have anything else to do. My leg was wrapped up, stomach couldn't lift, couldn't do anything, could barely sit up, couldn't shower by myself. So there was nothing else to do but sit around and think about it. And we all know that idle mind's the worst place to be. So went to therapy about 3 times a week initially, and then I went once a week, and then I started talking about it. Right, like I had to start getting it out. I had to start telling my story because I had to realize I wasn't the only one that had went through something like that, and still it hasn't stopped, especially with law enforcement. So I think knowing that I could talk to somebody else and know that I was helping somebody else go through the exact same thing that I went through became therapeutic as well. But yeah, I still go to therapy. I still more so for maintenance now. I think a lot of people have to get away from that stigma of you're not supposed to be in therapy, you're not supposed to talk about it. Like that's not the correct answer. That does more harm than good. So that's how I maintain now. But talking about it every chance that I get, accepting the awards because like I said, when Tom called me, I was like, why am I getting an award 8 years later? And he was like, you don't realize how like legit your story is. Like most people would never do that. Most men would never do that. Most women could not do that. So I just accept and embrace that, and I just continue to tell the story, really.
Yeah. Well, my hat's off to you. That's for sure. That's absolutely amazing. But I does it help? I mean, I'm sure you've recognized that it's not you that the the suspect doesn't know you or didn't know you,
Right.
and so it's nothing personal. It's
Right.
just uh, she was just basically just trying to get
Mhm.
out of the situation and thought that killing you and driving away was the best way to do it, and
Yeah.
so um, which is ironic, that thought process,
Yeah.
um, but I mean, it wasn't. Not that I'm trying to defend her, but just eliminating the problem is kind of obviously what she
What you
was
would.
trying to
Uh-huh.
say. I don't know. I'm just surmising here, but
Yeah.
so does that help that it was nothing personal for you? If that's
Oh
even
man.
if that's even something that I can even say, but I'm just, it's just, to
That's a
me,
good
it's just,
question.
I think they, I mean, that the suspect didn't know that it was Kimber Gist.
No.
He just knew that it was this deputy that came up and was interrupting whatever she was trying to do. So,
Hmm.
which didn't seem like it was going well anyway. So,
Yeah. So I'm glad you brought that up. That's a good question. Good question. I did take it personal. Truthfully, still to this day, I do take it personal because the way I see it is everybody has a whole lot going on in life. Nobody can just walk up to somebody and say there's something not troubling you right now. People listening right now are going to have something going on in their life. I've always been taught that you are valid in your feelings, but you are not always valid in your behavior. You can feel how you want to feel, but how you act after that upon that feeling, that's personally on you. So just to back up just a little bit before I say this next bill is she had a history of violence, right? So that gun that she shot me with, she had actually stolen from a car dealership. So she was from Louisiana. She was running from attempted murder charges in Louisiana and had a family member in Charleston. So while she was up here, she needed a car to get around in. So one of her roommates said, "Well, I clean for a living. You can come with me, get you some money." So while she was cleaning at this dealership, she entered into this deal with this guy. I was like, "Hey, I need a car. I don't have the money to make anything legit," which is why she was riding around in a car for 2 months with no tags on it. Um, but he was like, "Well, if you work and clean, we'll figure it out with the car." So that's where the car came from. Well, while she's working at the dealership and cleaning, she ended up stealing the guy who owns the dealership's gun. Why do you need a gun? You just tried to kill somebody, a couple of people in Louisiana. And then before that, she had already had a murder charge that, for whatever reason, didn't go through in court. So she beat a murder, but you're still out here pointing guns and trying to shoot and kill other people. That's just who you are in general. So I did take it personal knowing that, because what they figured was she knew that she had those attempted murder warrants. Louisiana had one of those storms, random storms that comes through that flooded the police department. So the police department had the warrants. The warrants just weren't in NCIC because they got wet. They had to retype them, get them resubmitted. So they weren't in NCIC. So her thought process of when she saw me was, I got these attempted murder warrants in Louisiana. She's gonna find out. Come to find out, no, I wouldn't have, because they weren't in NCIC. So her behavior, pattern of behavior, was just her in general. So I did take it personal because you're trying to kill multiple people. That's just who you are. Like it wasn't the fact that it was just me at that point in time. And for me personally, I just feel like if everybody that you come up to, you're just constantly trying to, put your hands on, kill. I take that personally. I do. I had to get out of the mentality that I couldn't hate the entire state of Louisiana, because at one point I did. I was just like, anybody that comes from Louisiana is unhinged. I don't think that now. That's why we go to therapy. Again, valid in my feelings, just not valid in actions. But yeah, it took a long time to. I mean, I'm not gonna say she's forgiven, but I'm not gonna live my life in grudge because of it.
yeah, well, I I think she was just basically, you were you were just the one that happened to be there. It's
Mhm.
not, it wasn't Deputy Gist that she was had a beef with. It was just
Right.
law enforcement in general. And
I got to get
I
away.
yeah,
Yeah.
which is unfortunate, because then it kind of encompasses all of law enforcement, and that's why so many of you have this target on your back. And
Mhm.
that really sends me over the edge, because I'm like, you know what? There's no law enforcement officer out there that deserves to be targeted, because
Right.
you guys are just doing your job, just like the store clerk is just doing his job, and the mayor's just doing his or her job, and
Right.
everybody's just trying to do their thing and then go home to their family. And um, the fact that law enforcement are there to um, uphold what society basically deems is what all the rules that we need to live together.
Right.
Those are just basic laws of I don't know, just kind of decency, really. And
Mhm.
if you can't live with those, then go somewhere else.
Right.
But
Absolutely.
yeah, it's I don't know. There's just so many people that I think, because they've never really been um, held to account, maybe from even when they were really young,
Hmm.
then they just feel that they can just get away with that kind of stuff, and
Absolutely.
that's when folks like you roll up on them, and you're like, no, that's not the way tonight's going to roll. So,
Right. Right.
well, absolutely amazing, Kimber, and
Thank you, Jared.
yeah. So I'm just, like I said, thank God you're still here, and
Thank
you're such a beautiful soul, and you're doing great things and telling your story, because I think telling this story is really important,
you. Hmm.
because I it's really interesting when I talk to just normal people, people that are outside of law enforcement. When I say normal, they just don't understand what you guys go through on a
Right.
on a just a minute by minute basis. It's like, who would have ever thought, when how many times have we read just in the last couple of months where an
Hmm.
officer is shot at, wounded, some of them killed,
Killed. Yep.
just doing a simple car stop. They somebody was speeding, and so you pull them over, and next thing you know, it's a gunfight.
Right.
And I'm sure, um, I'm sure you felt the tension escalating when you were there that night. Especially when she was still fidgeting
Yeah.
around, she wouldn't hold still.
The
But
I think
at,
the tension, I realized it when that second time I told her to sit still, and then that's when I realized, that's when I could feel that muscle. There was never really any attitude. There was never any bickering going back and forth. They were both like really nice. I mean, they kept it short, but they weren't like which the hoopla that you see on the news. Like, it was none of that. It was just, okay, it's for real now. I have to act. So yeah, it was towards the end when I was like, okay, yeah, this is it.
this is on. This is
Hmm.
so you described you falling onto your side and then rolling onto your back in order to get access to your weapons. So by that time, did you realize that this is life or death right here?
Oh yeah, when I fell and I felt that pinch on my side where I knew I was hit, I just couldn't figure out where it was going. I knew then it was life or death. That's how I knew. You got to pick a side: roll left, roll right. Which one? And I had to pick right correctly. Because I just thought, well, I'm already hit on this left side. I felt this pinch. Keep everything on the left. I'm right-handed, which ended up being the correct decision to make. So yeah, I knew then when I fell, I said, this is either I'm gonna lay here and die and let her do what she wants to do, or I'm gonna at least fight back. I was gonna give her hell either way. I wasn't just gonna lay there.
Well, I remember, especially when you were at the law enforcement ceremony, you said, by the time you realized you were hit, you were like, that just really just pissed you off.
It did. It did. When it clicked that I was shot, I said, yeah. I said, you don't woke up another side of me.
Say, okay, nice Kimber is gone now,
Yeah. The nice
and
Southern Kimber was out the window. It
now
was all
you're
gas, no brakes.
dealing with Deputy Gist, and
Right.
it's on.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I think all of us have a side like that. It just takes something drastic to happen
Yep.
to really
Absolutely.
wake that up. But the whole mama bear, you start messing with some lady's kids, and you'll see a side of her that's
Oh
just
yeah.
unreal. And it's kind of same thing with most guys. They're just like, most of us are just kind of laid back, and we're just like, whatever, until for some guys, it's like you mess with their truck, or
Yeah.
you mess with their family, something, and then just it flips, and man, it's on. So, and good, that's self-preservation, right?
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And that was one thing that I always want to tell people in general is like self-preservation is something that can't be taught. It's like you got to want to stay alive or you don't.
Hmm.
It's one of the two. And I always want to stay alive.
No, absolutely. There's always something worth living for. So
Right, absolutely. And that was one thing I thought about my family during that time too. So
yeah. Well,
yeah, especially my nephew, because I said my nephew's birthday party is this weekend. He is going to be upset if I don't make it. So the whole time I'm like,
yeah.
one, don't die, but two, on his birthday weekend, like, yeah, no.
Well, you know what? If that's one of the things that kept you going, then whatever it takes. So, well, Kimber, is there anything for those that are listening to it that are thinking about law enforcement that hear your story and they're going, "Oh, screw that! I'm not going into law enforcement."
Yeah, no.
What would you tell them to recommend? Yeah, it's a noble profession. It's
I-
something worth
Yep.
doing. How would you say that?
Took the words out of my mouth. It is still very noble and still very much needed. Um, don't believe all of the rhetoric and the hype in the media with the tension between, because I work with a lot of good people in the community when I was at the sheriff's office. There's bad communities and there's bad people everywhere. You're not just going to outrun that. But the silent majority, and then the people that actually support you when you need to be supported, and the ones that'll correct you when you're wrong, they're still there. So it's still a very noble profession. I loved it. Um, I mean, I did 10 years in it, love it, still miss it, but at the end of the day, like I still, when I see law enforcement, I still love them. I'm just like, oh, I hope he's safe tonight, or she. I love when I see new photos where there's new people coming out of the police academy, and I'm like, okay, that still makes me happy because you're still needed. Just don't believe the hype, pretty much. There's going to be times where the media will post the worst photo that you can see, but then they won't post the best one. And that's the one that always reminded me, was that I could always go to a certain community or a certain area and I knew they had our backs.
Well, yeah, I find media to be, um, let's just say most of them I wouldn't hang out with,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
but it's just ironic, they'll talk tough, and then but as soon as something actually happens, who are they going to call?
Exactly. The
You know,
police.
they're not calling other reporters.
Reporters. Nope.
Yeah, they're calling the police. Oh, come save me.
Yep,
And
absolutely.
like, you know what? Don't talk smack if you're not able to go all the way around. It's just,
Absolutely.
anyway. Yeah, I just let not get too sidelined on that one, but anyway, yeah. Kimber, you are absolutely awesome. I
Thank you.
appreciate you coming on and telling your story.
Absolutely.
And I know you're still recovering, but just know that everybody loves you, and
Thank you.
you are destined for great things. And I'd say just keep sharing your story, because you're helping people understand not only what it's like out there for the all of law enforcement, but also if something does happen,
Yep.
then you've got not only a huge support group, but also, I mean, the story about the deputies going and getting your mom, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's just amazing. I'll bet they didn't even,
Didn't even
not
bat
even
an
a,
eye.
not even a second or a fraction of a second of hesitation. They're just like, yeah, I'll go.
Yep. Yep.
And
Send
it's,
me.
yeah, I had a friend that basically said, you know what? You want to surround yourself with, a handful of those guys that, if you call them at 3 a.m, they'll be just like, what do you need?
Yep.
And those are few and far between, but there's always going to be a few of them, and
Yep.
those are the ones that you really cherish. So
Absolutely. Jared, thank you so much. I enjoyed it. Thank you for the invite. I love telling my story. I just tell anybody, if you need me, reach out. I'm not hard to find. Kimber Gist on pretty much every platform.
yeah, yeah, I appreciate you mentioning that. Is there, I mean, if people really want to read about you, do you have a website or anything like that?
I do not have a website, but I am very active on Facebook and Instagram. That's where a majority of my law enforcement stories are. So yeah, just Kimber Gist on both social media platforms, and then Kimber Gist on LinkedIn as well.
Awesome. Okay. Well, if you'll send those to me,
I
we'll
sure
include
will.
them in the show notes, and we can get those out to everybody. So everybody, make sure to follow Kimber, especially on Instagram, Facebook, and share her story because it's absolutely fantastic. So, hey,
Absolutely.
Kimber, thank you again.
Thank you, Jared. Thanks so much.
Thanks for joining us. Your attention today brings us one step closer to exposing and eliminating the evil that brings crime to our communities. Hit subscribe and share this episode. Together, we will bring justice to every victim.